Nestled at the base of the Chuckanuts, where the mountains meet the sea, is a beautiful urban forest that one would expect to find only in remote areas. Here on Bellingham's south side, between the Interurban Trail and Fairhaven Park, is an area of rich biological diversity with abundant wildlife. The headwaters of two watersheds originate here. High-quality wetlands comprise almost half the area, second-growth forest and steep slopes the rest. Great horned owls hunt here. Deer, raccoons, foxes, coyotes, and other species make this place their home. Sea-run cutthroat trout have even been seen spawning in the waters. The peace and tranquility one finds here are almost unknown in an urban area. We're standing here in South Fairhaven looking at a beautiful second-growth forest in this very peaceful valley. 15 years ago, the Madrona Corporation wanted to build 1,400 housing units up here in the forest. Interurban Neighbors was formed as a community response to that inappropriate development. The Cascades meet the sea in this part of the Northwest, and it's a rare place where the mountains do come down to the sea.
And come in town.
And come right through town.
That habitat corridor, that habitat linkage, as well as the viewscape, as well as the multiplicity of values that this natural area holds right now and functions as right now. I think it does tie in. I think it ties in. There's a groundswell of community enthusiasm and interest and dedication, commitment to preserving the Chuckanuts. There's a group in Skagit that's working on the southern Chuckanuts. We're working on the northern Chuckanuts right now. This ties in naturally as a landform, as well as habitat, as well as public human use.
Right now, you see that major wetlands we are following along. This is where it's coming out, at least the surface part, and subsurface-wise, it's flowing through this system too. And right now, it's just going into this ditch, and then eventually down to Padden Creek. There's some also flowing down to the right, subsurface-wise. But again, a concern is with compacting the area up above, putting roads in and building sites and so forth, changing the runoff pattern so it's more flashy flows all at once. It's going to aggravate the problem here, obviously. And Chuckanut Drive is acting as a barrier. Right now there are problems with just this road intercepting flow.
View Crest is where the arterial was supposed to start, and it's a major problem in terms of siting. We don't, of course, see it as a developable site like other people might. Obviously, architects are going to look at it differently, but so many people in the community do treasure it, and you know, its proximity to the Interurban Trail, and now that we've seen it has so many wetlands and unbuildable sites, and the concern of the road, and you know, there's just a lot of things beyond just how close it is to a wetland, etc.
We have to do this kind of development right or not do it at all.
We need to maintain nature within the city.
The more sensitive areas and the more valuable areas are the areas that they'll try to avoid. And the areas that are less valuable and less habitat for creatures and less biologically diverse and so on and so forth are the areas that they'll try to preserve for those functions.
The problem is you can protect the most valuable, but if you don't leave a large enough buffer, they're going to be worthless.
Now a new owner, Greenbrier Construction, along with their financial partner Horizon Bank, has plans to build 739 multifamily housing units up here in the forest. This proposed development has met with controversy and community concern.
It'll add a lot of pollutants to the wetlands and overpower it. I mean, wetlands are supposed to filter, but I don't think there's any doubt that it'll overwhelm them. The skunk cabbage, which is just a beautiful rite of spring, will probably suffer as well as every other living creature down here. It's important to me to keep the trail in its condition as it is right now, because when I enter the trailhead here, I feel like I'm isolated from the urban environment somewhat by the buffer zone of the trees and the natural area on either sides of the trail.
I've lived in a great many places across the country as a part of the process of finding a community that I really felt at home in. And when I came here, I felt a spirit, a feeling among the people who lived here that they really respected nature.
I'm moving to Auburn actually this month, so one thing I noticed about Auburn in terms of its difference from Bellingham is Bellingham has just a beautiful green space and trails network, and when I went down there I noticed almost immediately the difference between a planned community like Bellingham with careful attention to green space and a place like Auburn where they haven't been nearly as good about preserving areas.
The thing that I appreciate most about having the trail system that we have here in Bellingham is an opportunity to hear the silence. Life gets so noisy, and I think we get distracted from our inner purpose when we can't hear the silence and appreciate the beauty of the woods.
I think it's the last jewel in our community. It is the crown. It's the reason why people come for our business from Chuckanut to come out Chuckanut Drive. They come from all over the world just to drive down the street and experience the whole beauty of it.
It's just going to be years of noise and diesel fumes, hammering, more vehicles, and this road they're talking about crossing over the interurban trail is just going to destroy the serenity down here.
A new community group called Responsible Development has been formed to deal with the issue with the ultimate goal of saving the 100 Acre Wood.
Horizon Bank and Greenbrier are committed to working with the neighbors, if they'll work with us. We're committed to being good neighbors. We're committed to working with the Parks Department. We're committed to working with the Greenways folks if we have any common benefit.
You have pointed to Issaquah Highlands as your model for this development. My question is, I've seen a lot of photographs now of Issaquah Highlands, and there's just about not a tree left standing. So I guess I'm wondering about this conflict between what I've heard about your desire to do green building and leave a lot of trees and protect the wetlands, when your model mowed down every tree and it's all about cars, impervious surfaces, and pavement.
We'll have a heck of a lot of trees left. If they have none, we're way ahead of them. We would like to build 10-story buildings. We would like to put them in the woods.
You want to build 10-story apartment buildings or condominiums on that site. You are changing the complexion of this entire area, and it's outrageous. It's outrageous. But I tell you one thing, you got some guts, pal. But now, even I'm on board with some of these folks, and I assure you, I'm one of the few conservatives who live in this town, but I'm opposed to it, big time.
Who requested the rezone from rural to urban density, which was at the time it was rezoned higher than anything that was surrounding it. The density that was approved in 1980 was higher than everything that was around it. I would like to know who requested that rezone, since nobody seems to know why it happened, and even the mayor is on record saying that it's inappropriate.
I don't know. I wasn't involved with those people. The prior owners weren't involved at that time either.
It seems pretty obvious from this group, and probably a larger group, that although you're offering it to the community, this community doesn't really want it.
We have problems all over the community with growth. You know what the problems are? You people. Builders don't create customers. Customers create desires to live in a home.
In the urban village and urban neighborhood concept that the city has put forward, the requirement for South neighborhood by the year 2022 is to absorb 250 new dwelling units. This man is proposing 734 immediately. There is no way that this neighborhood should be required to take that much of a burden for infill in the urban growth area.
My understanding is that a good neighbor tries to cooperate with those in his community and take into account their concerns. The concerns of this entire community are that this is a priceless piece of property that cannot possibly be replaced. And there's no negotiation on that matter. It's a fact.
In light of the fact that due to the unique environmental qualities of this property, the democratic will of many citizens of Bellingham has been expressed over the last few years in such forums as organizations that cropped up to resist the development under the previous owner, under the Beyond Greenways levy that was voted on last time, where most of the voters were given to understand that if they passed that levy, this property would be bought and put into the public domain. And at virtually every neighborhood association meeting where a poll was taken in the 5 South Bellingham neighborhoods, up in the 90% of those people attending who are active in the neighborhoods do not want this project to occur at all. I would like to ask you to strongly consider working with your partner Horizon Bank to put the entire project on hold, because there is currently an active organization who would like to raise the money, partly through another levy, partly through other means, to buy this property, because we sincerely do not believe that this is an appropriate place for infill in the city of Bellingham.
Are there any more questions? We received the message, thank you. If the city of Bellingham citizenry, acting through its city government, decided it wanted to purchase this property, that it has means to do so.
Public ownership? Preservation of the property? Many people feel this land is too precious to lose to development, and it has intrinsic values on its own for our community. Just what is so special about this land? We decided to explore the true values of this forest.
So the character and the environment continues to change, mostly dictated by what man has done with it. We have here beside us the marsh connected to this property. It is probably the largest single entity environment that's been uninfluenced to any degree by man yet. And that's what we're looking at today, and what I would certainly like to see, and my agency would like to see, preserved. Wide variety of plant life here, aquatic plants that are all an indication of richness, not only in diversity of plants, but of insects that would live on them, and of course insects are food for the various birds and fish and so on, and frogs. So this is not a sterile, as it sits right now, this is not a sterile environment.
The wetlands on this property are forested wetlands, which are generally agreed by the wetlands scientific community to be the most valuable and the most difficult kinds of wetlands to replace or to replicate. The combination of Oregon ash and Sitka spruce in this wetland means that this needs to be considered. It may have other qualities that we don't know about. There are also cedar, which again is relatively rare, especially in Bellingham, where most of the wetlands have been seriously disturbed. And it should be considered a unique wetland for Bellingham and maybe for Whatcom County.
Wetlands and the riparian forest adjacent to them are the most productive habitat that we have per unit area. There's at least 359 different species of animals alone that are found in western Washington riparian and wetland area.
We do know that there are species here that are species of concern or that have protected status, and those would include the pileated woodpecker, which is our largest woodpecker.
The adjacency to water and the nice protection that this area offers, it's probably a deer fawning area. And that's typically where they fawn, is right adjacent to wetlands, to water. Another reason why the deer are here is because we've got a lot of diversity in forest stand here. There's openings. You can see they can get in the sunlight, and you can get different kinds of plants to feed on, and they get back in a stand like that, and they've got protection from the wind and the rain. So combination of factors make this really desirable.
A federal species of concern is the red-legged frog. It, like many frogs, requires both wetland or aquatic and terrestrial habitats. It breeds in the aquatic habitats, and then it spends most of its life in the terrestrial habitats. Obviously, if you impact the wetland, if you develop the wetland, if you degrade it with contaminant runoff and all that sort of thing, then you'll obviously lose the breeding sites. But if you were to somehow manage to protect a wetland from those contaminants and develop the surrounding forest, you're also going to lose the frog because you won't have the terrestrial habitats that it needs. Even if you have terrestrial habitat in other parks nearby, it won't be able to use this wetland because it won't be able to get past the roads and other development.
We've got red fox that migrate from this area here, across Chuckanut Drive. People have seen them. I've been in wildlife management and through the woods in 30-some years. And in all that time, it's the only area I've ever seen the red fox. Constantly keep in mind that no environment, marsh, wetland, or anything is an entity unto itself. It does affect the lands and the waterways and the wildlife and everything for miles and miles below it. And that's what we need to look at, because this connects to Chuckanut Bay. And if siltation starts flowing down this from road development, land development, if herbicides, pesticides, fertilizers go down into Chuckanut Bay, we have some very sensitive critters down there. And they would all be influenced by the quality of the water that comes from this marsh, comes from this development if it occurs.
There are also a number of fish that either spawn and rear in the wetlands here or in the creeks that it drains into. Those include the cutthroat and steelhead trout and coho, chum, and Chinook salmon.
This area right here, right where the feeder stream, the main feeder stream, crosses underneath the interurban trail. 1 week ago, I was able to see a female sea-run cutthroat that was finishing digging a nest there. When you start talking about an ecosystem and interrelationship, realize that one of nature's creatures, a sea-run cutthroat, has passed all the way from the saltwater, Chuckanut Bay, up through a stream system, through this big marsh, and its interrelated little waterways, and come up to the head end of the marsh and spawned. The importance of that one animal, I think, is underestimated a lot. The sea-run cutthroat is an extremely sensitive indicator species to indicate the health of an environment. The fact that it's here now indicates this is an extremely healthy environment, one worth saving. The origins of the water above the wetland are extremely important to the health of that wetland, just as the waters of this wetland are extremely important to the waters downstream.
Wetlands, again, are kidneys of the landscape. And you cut off your kidneys at great peril.
It must always be remembered the Chuckanut Ridge property can be almost is the headwaters of two watersheds in part. Not only to this unnamed stream that flows into Chuckanut Bay, but also headwaters and waterways and wetlands that feed into Paddon Creek. And if you look at the volume of water that's here, it's about 3 times the volume of water that was coming in on the small little creek that we looked at coming under the interurban that had the sea-run cutthroat nest. This is 3 times the volume. Well, if you've got 3 times the volume, obviously the other parts of that volume are coming from other associated wetlands distributed throughout this property. If you have roads with roadside ditches and drainage areas that flow oils, herbicides, pesticides, lawn fertilizers, whatever, into this marsh, you will alter it forever. So we're not dealing with an island, we're dealing with an interrelated ecosystem, and what we do in one area affects other areas.
So you can imagine converting this forest and its associated wetlands into a housing development that you may, even if you have plans to retain wetlands, at least on a map, you would lose much of their their function. So you'd have local impacts, and those would be severe.
Every drop is important. And if we removed 1/3 of it that was coming from springs, which are your most constant supplier, we could dry that up not into a wetland and a marsh, but into, from the animal's perspective, a desert.
If you look at a landscape, regional landscape, and the landscape would be, this area and then all the parks in the surrounding area, one thing you want to pay attention to is the potential of that landscape to support a network of populations. So in all likelihood, if you develop this place, we're going to lose species perhaps in Seaholm Hill, in Connolly Creek Natural Area, along Paddon Creek, and many of the other parks and protected areas in this region. And so this site occupies a position on the landscape that is of great strategic importance. It essentially provides a link between the large areas of the Chuckanuts to the south and the parks and natural areas that the city has wisely protected to the northeast and west. Essentially, if you think of the concept of a keystone, where you pull out the keystone and the whole structure falls, well, that appears to be what this place is functioning as. If you don't care about those species, but you want to be able to get home on time, then you should also be concerned about this place, because the additional traffic that a place like this generates is going to impact your life wherever you live in town. That traffic is going to affect the north end of town, it's going to affect the east end of town, it's going to affect more than just the immediate arterials that would feed this place. We've seen this in other places, and I hope that we're smart enough and that we're active enough not to repeat the mistakes that have been made elsewhere.
I worry about the floods that occur when we strip the lands and remove the trees and the root systems that hold back the water and the vegetation here.
But where the water lies and where the rock layers are and where the aquifers are should be a concern before they put any money into it. And when they cut enough trees to put that many houses, that's going to just make the water pour down here.
In the condition that you see it here, with lots of vegetation, loose soil material, perhaps 80% of all the water that falls on this surface never makes it out in terms of runoff. However, if you put condominiums and roadways and everything that goes with a large development, probably 80% would come out. So you've got 4 times more runoff after than you did before. The question is, what are you going to do with that downstream? Because there is a lot of loose material in this slope and virtually no bedrock that I can see, we've got the problem of sedimentation. And especially during the construction phase, you can get sediment yields of hundreds of tons per acre. And where are those hundreds of tons per acre going to go? But downslope, and in this case it's going to be downslope right into the ponds, which classify, I'm sure, as Class 1 wetlands. It's going to fundamentally change the character of the area down below the slope. I would perceive that it could be entirely filled in during the construction phase in this slope.
Simply during the construction phase.
Right. And to the extent that you can't control it and you can't protect the wetlands down below, it becomes an impossible proposition for a developer.
I don't know of any way to put a road here, a 2-lane road or a 4-lane road, and handle the flow that is interrupted, the springs that exist along this road, the surface water flowing on. I don't know any way, and I don't think anybody else does, within any economically justifiable means, to keep this pond and wetland alive while still handling the downhill subsurface flow of water and the springs that exist here.
If this project were to occur, and if it were to include anywhere near the number of units proposed, then the road would have to be constructed.
Is it possible that there was a mistake made in allowing this amount of density on this property?
The density may have been too high for that site. And part of the reason for that, part of the rationale for that was that it was recognized that the new arterial road through the property was likely to be a significant expense, and that expense would probably have to be borne to a large extent by the developer of the property.
that the zoning for Chuckanut Ridge was never rationally determined or properly applied. In 1978, it was zoned thoughtfully and properly 20,000 square foot per unit. In 1980, mysteriously, without a planning commission hearing, without consideration, recommendations, staff reports, recommendations, council, no public notice, no public process, no public record. It was zoned 3,000 square foot per unit. We mustered a campaign to stop the last development. We mustered a campaign to float a levy. We taxed ourselves to buy that property, and it never happened. Now it is going to cost the citizens of Bellingham millions and millions and millions of dollars more, whether it's developed or not.
We sat down with the bank, and on Wednesday and Thursday we had some very serious discussions with them. But what they've agreed to is to give us the opportunity to buy this piece of property and put it into public ownership. It is not a done deal, and it's a long ways from a done deal.
As you know, our Hulami Estelnoch had utilized this area for time immemorial. The concerns that we have here at Lummi is impacts to natural resources as well as cultural archaeological resources. They're a footprint of our ancestors. I'm here as an echo for my elders.
Having hiked the trail several times, I have found little bits of what life truly is about. Once the coo of the owl is gone, the smell of pine has vanished, and the growth of the forest has been destroyed. What palace is going to bring our superficial mindset back to the true meaning of life?
It's so serious because it's about our neighborhoods, it's about our homes, it's about our families. That's why it's so passionate. We all have to rise to the occasion and pass whatever we need to pass to buy these special places, and I believe we can.
We just moved here from Los Angeles. We know that if you don't stop them now, it's going to get worse and worse. And if you stop them now, you'll have what LA lacks, a decent environment.
When I was pregnant with him, we were walking there. He's been in those woods since he was born. And it's just the most peaceful, meditative place to go walking in Bellingham.
This is a bad development. It's not good for the bank, it's not good for the community, and it's certainly not good for posterity, because this is a treasured piece of property that is of interest, actually, to some of the people at Huxley College at Western Washington University.
There should not be any building in there. And people that want to build there appear to be doing it only for their economic gratification and never mind what happens to the populace.
Well, I've enjoyed doing business with Horizon Bank. I have money there right now, our whole family does, but I can't keep my money there if this is the kind of project they're going to fund. We'll remove it and we'll encourage others to do so also.
In a very long-term perspective, 20 or 30 or 40 years down the road, it may be that the effort needed to acquire the property or to pursue lesser impact alternatives would be insignificant compared to the future value of the property. And you know, in economic terms, we refer to those values as values of bequest or legacy. There can be essentially dimensionless values.
Clark's Point is a large natural area bordering the bay south of town. We spoke with members of the Clark family who own Clark's Point and who have voluntarily chosen to save their land by giving up the development rights and putting their property into a land trust.
I really wanted to preserve the trees and have it be a place for the wildlife. And the deer, raccoons, fox. What's really wonderful is that within this last year, we found an eagle's nest on the point.
At least it preserves the natural beauty, and that seemed to be what we wanted.
And the idea of having this land be preserved for perpetuity really pleases me a lot.
We got the power to develop, we got the power to preserve. We choose to do the preservation. And I'm real happy we decided to do that.
There's a need for leadership to step up, public leadership to step up to say to the people, here are the important assets of our community. Here's a way to set them aside permanently, and this is what we propose to do that.
In order to save it, we must purchase it.
If you look at a map and you know where the city boundaries are, if this is within city boundaries, you could call that infill. But it really is a peripheral area, and to extend services out here, particularly transportation services, is going to require considerable investment.
Growth does not pay for itself. It does not. It's not a winning proposition.
So ultimately, that's going to come out of the pockets of the existing residents.
This development is going to need incredible road improvements for it to work, which we don't want to see anyway in Fairhaven. It would also take new fire facilities, new school facilities. If 800 homes or something like that go in there, all of those things will have to be, the bill will have to be paid by the citizenry.
Growth is very expensive. Growth doesn't pay for itself.
Many beautiful towns like ours are being ruined. Ruined because of poor planning, because of out-of-control developers and weak governments. If we lose this, it's our fault. We need to organize, we need to raise the money, we need to elect officials that will stand up for what we really want.
We believe that the final opportunity to buy large tracts is upon us. This city has been discovered. Everyone has seen how the housing market has just exploded. And developers are coming in here from out of the region. And with that happening, the cry has come up from many concerned citizens that some of these beautiful wooded parcels be retained for future generations and also just for nature. There's actually value in just leaving space natural.
The value spent to protect this place would be greater than the value lost if we developed it. And so that would simply be a wise investment. What's at stake here is again, the ecological and recreational integrity of our network of parks. In that sense, this is a very important investment.
There's a group of us that are very excited about the potential of purchasing that land. We are also wanting to meet and talk with other members of the community from other regions of the community because, of course, the pressures of development aren't just in Fairhaven. And so we're talking about other parcels that might be available in other neighborhoods that we could save as well so that this levy would be very much a benefit to the entire community.
We recognize that if we're going to raise money as a city, it's the whole city's money, and we need to use this opportunity to create new parks in every part of the city and fairly distribute that money. 40% of the money raised will buy land in the north part of the city, where they desperately need more parks. 30% is going to buy land in the central part of the city, where they desperately need more parks. And 30% of the money will go to the south side, so we can purchase the Chuckanut Ridge and protect that beautiful habitat area and make it another gorgeous park in the Chuckanuts for everyone to share.
It would be my role as a person that would be working on the Greenway Levy with a full committee to try to explain to people that this is really worth being passionate about. It's so exciting, the opportunity to maintain the integrity of this landscape.
Anytime a Greenways levy comes along, it's well worth supporting. I think Bellingham was brilliant for having the Greenways levy when they did, and I would vote for something like that again in a second. So our tax dollars at work for something well worth supporting, I think.
The next levy will actually probably be a bond issue. We are very concerned that we not have people experience any rise in their taxes beyond the normal rise that exists because of reevaluation. And yet that same money could be something that could be spent and dedicated to a legacy for the future. Take a look around and see what Greenways has done for this community. Of course, everyone's aware of the boardwalk that now goes down from Taylor Street, and what an enhancement that has brought. This particular levy is going to be designated for land purchases, but there will be some other amenities like that that the public will be able to appreciate and enjoy immediately, and they'll all be detailed out in the levy by the time it goes to the vote. We definitely want to try to make it a completely community-involved project.
I think it's fair, I think it's passable, I think we're going to do it, and I think we're going to be proud that we did it, and we're going to live in a better town because of it.
Many questions remain regarding this proposed development. Is this really the sort of development we need as a community? Could there have been a mistake in the original zoning set forth in the Bellingham Plan, when it allowed for such density in an area full of wetlands, steep slopes, and only 35 acres of buildable land? And what about the connector road crossing over the interurban trail? Did the city planners make an inappropriate trade-off by allowing the developers so much density so they could pay for the road? And do we even need a road? What about preservation of this urban forest? Downzoning, bonds, levies, land trust. These are just some of our options to preserve the integrity of this forest. Can we be really creative and find a just and equitable solution for all? Can the community and the developers see beyond the immediate reward of dollars and bequeath to our children's children something more precious than urban sprawl? May we join together and find a way to save this land, a treasure too precious to lose.
The 100 acres is just so important because ever since I've been born, I've grown up around it, and I go there probably nearly once or more a week, and it's kind of like my sanctuary, 100 acres. It's my getaway place. I've just learned little bits of what life is about and what the true meaning is, and just it's kind of like my escape from the pressures of life, and hope that my children and the children after me, next generations, can learn what I learned from it too.
We must preserve these lands for our own benefit. Yes, they help in flood control. For our own benefit in viewing wildlife. But the wildlife has an intrinsic value of its own. It doesn't need to justify its existence on the basis of our economic system of dollars and cents. It just has a right to be.
And so why not go ahead and stand up and say, we as the taxpayers would much rather spend our money this way and preserve the land than just be taxed unknowingly to pay for infrastructure. And I think that that's a wonderful thing to be able to tell people that this is a great way to save money on your taxes, ultimately.
I would say choose it or lose it. And it is a choice.
I think we should all dig very deeply into our pockets and pull out whatever we can and encourage others to do the same.
We really are feeling and seeing a community at work here. You know, people really, this is drawing people together and they really care about it, and they're expressing their care.
If we want to protect large habitat areas, any open land that's left, we have to do it now. It's our last chance.
We don't have to let this place get as bad as everywhere else. We could choose to say enough is enough, and we are going to protect the quality that we have now.
100 years from now, when people are discussing, if they ask the question, did they set aside too much parkland? Way back when? Way back in 2005. How many people are going to say, oh, they set aside way too much parkland? Everyone's going to say, oh, thank God they set aside that parkland.
So everyone, please save the 100 Acre Woods.